NewsEpicentre with me, Maria Shakil. Our top story is the daylight encounter of two gangsters involved in the murder of Punjabi singer Sidhu Moosewala. The gunfight took place around noon on the outskirts of Amritsar, 10 kilometers from the Pakistan border. The gangsters have been identified as Jagroop Singh alias Rupa and Manpreet Manu. They were among the shooters who gunned down Moosewala in May. The gunfight started around noon when the police cornered the gangsters and asked them to surrender. They refused and opened fire on the police. Jagroop was killed around 2 p.m. while Manpreet was killed around 4. The police also recovered one pistol and one AK-47 rifle along with a cache of ammunition from the spot. This comes almost 2 months after the murder of Sidhu Moosewala, who was killed just a day after the state government downgraded his security. Now, these killers had been on the run for weeks. The latest image coming from June 21st, where they can be seen on a bike in the district of Moga. The murder has also shed light on a larger criminal nexus, as the killing was directed by Canada-based Satinderjeet Singh alias Goldie Brar in coordination with gangster Lawrence Bishnoi, who was running a pan-India gang from Delhi's Tihar jail. 2 months after the murder of Moosewala, was the Punjab police dragging its feet? The question remains, how was Lawrence Bishnoi, sitting in Tihar jail, able to plan the killing with Goldie Brar, who was in Canada? How was this planned and executed under the watch of the Punjab police? When will action be taken against those elements within the system who were clearly involved with this syndicate? We'll raise all these questions on the show. We'll be also joined by Aam Aadmi Party Minister in Punjab government in just a bit. But here's how the story unfolded today.
Raw gunfire ringing out over lush agricultural fields. 20 kilometers from Amritsar, only 10 kilometers from the Pakistan border. Punjab Police's anti-gangster task force had been tailing two of the killers of Sidhu Moosewala, Jagroop Singh Rupa and Manpreet Singh Manu, for weeks now. Rupa and Manu were among 3 of Moosewala's killers still on the run. This CCTV grab of the two on a bike in Moga on the 21st of June had raised concerns on their presence in Punjab. The third man, Deepak Mundi, has still not been traced. Early Wednesday afternoon, as police tracked Rupa and Manu, a massive police force was rushed into village Bhakna as reports of the two killers hiding there surfaced. The area cordoned off, locals told to stay indoors. Ambulances were rushed in past the security cordon as news came in of Rupa being killed.
A team है जिसने एनकाउंटर ਨੂੰ अंजाम ਦਿੱਤਾ ਹੈ ਹਥਿਆਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਹੈ ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਨੇ ਮੁਕਾਬਲਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਉਹ ਟੀਮ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਟੀਮ ਦੇ ਜਾਂਬਾਜ਼ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਹੈ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਜਾਂਬਾਜ਼ਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਸ਼ਾਰਪ ਸ਼ੂਟਰਸ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਅੰਜਾਮ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਇਆ ਹੈ
ਪੰਜਾਬ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਨੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵਾਰਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਸਰਵਿਸ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਵੀ ਆਖਿਆ ਪਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਲਗਾਤਾਰ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਟੀਮਾਂ ਤੇ ਫਾਇਰਿੰਗ ਕੀਤੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਕਹਿਣ ਦੇ ਬਾਵਜੂਦ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਸਰੈਂਡਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਅਲਟੀਮੇਟਲੀ ਕ੍ਰਾਸ ਫਾਇਰ ਹੈਵੀ ਐਕਸਚੇਂਜ ਆਫ ਫਾਇਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਦੋਨੋਂ ਗੈਂਗਸਟਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਮੌਤ ਹੈ
The encounter in which the gangsters were felled was not without damage on the police side too. 3 cops were injured. A news channel's camera person got a bullet in his right leg. A gruesome chapter in a prolonged saga that the Moosewala murder has turned into, with threads extending from prison to forces orchestrating gang wars in India from across Punjab, Canada and possibly other nations too.
Joining me on the show, Harpal Singh Cheema. He is the he is in fact Punjab's finance minister. Anil Sareen, chief spokesperson of Punjab BJP. Shashikant is former DGP of Punjab. Vipin Pabbi is senior journalist. Mr. Cheema, how were Jagroop and Manpreet able to evade the cops for almost 2 months after the murder of Sidhu Moosewala?
देखिए पंजाब में ये गैंगवार जो हो रही थी इसमें बहुत सारे लोग जो शामिल थे वो पंजाब के और पंजाब के दूसरे जो हमारे पड़ोस के स्टेट है उनके लोग भी शामिल थे और सिद्धू मूसेवाला का जब मर्डर हुआ था उसके बाद पंजाब पुलिस में हमने एक एंटी गैंगस्टर फोर्स का गठन किया था। पंजाब के मुख्यमंत्री सर भगवंत सिंह मान जी ने एंटी गैंगस्टर फोर्स का गठन किया था और ये आज बहुत बड़ी कामयाबी मिली है कि 2 जो बड़े गैंगस्टर थे उनको पंजाब पुलिस ने मार मुकाया है। एक एनकाउंटर में जब उन्होंने पंजाब पुलिस पे हमला किया तो जवाबी फायर में वो मारे गए। तो मैं समझता हूँ पंजाब में ना किसी गैंगस्टर का स्थान है, ना पंजाब में ड्रग का स्थान है। पंजाब को ड्रग फ्री किया जाएगा, पंजाब को गैंगस्टर फ्री किया जाएगा।
जी, लेकिन क्या ये एक्सेप्ट करेंगे आप,
चाहते हैं
क्या ये आज आप एक्सेप्ट करेंगे कि ये जो उनके किलर्स थे वो अभी तक भाग इसलिए पाए थे क्योंकि जो सिक्योरिटी एस्टैब्लिशमेंट है, जो पॉलिटिकल एस्टैब्लिशमेंट में है, उसमें कोई उनके सिंपथाइजर्स बैठे हुए हैं?
देखिए, पंजाब पुलिस बड़े अच्छे तरीके से काम कर रही है। जब से जो मर्डर हुआ है, जहां जहां भी कोई गैंगस्टर छुप के बैठा हुआ उसको निकालने का काम कर रही है। बहुत सारे गैंगस्टर को हमने पकड़ा भी है, चाहे वो दिल्ली की जेल में बैठा था या कहीं और था। सबको पंजाब में एक कानून के तहत, एक लॉ कोर्ट के तहत जहां पंजाब में लाकर उनका ट्रायल हो रहा है, उनकी इन्वेस्टिगेशन हो रही है। पर लेकिन जो अभी तक नहीं पकड़े गए, जिनको हम पकड़ रहे हैं, उनके खिलाफ पंजाब पुलिस ने अपनी जो मुहिम है वो शुरू की हुई है। हम किसी को नहीं बख्शेंगे। जो भी पंजाब की शांति को भंग करेगा हम उसको सजा देंगे, चाहे वो कोई भी हो। लेकिन मैं यहाँ पे स्पष्ट करना चाहता हूँ कि जो पुरानी सरकारें थी पंजाब में, चाहे वो कांग्रेस पार्टी की सरकार थी, चाहे वो श्रोमणी अकाली दल बीजेपी की सरकार थी, इन लोगों ने गैंगस्टर को बढ़ावा दिया, पंजाब में गैंगस्टर को पैदा किया। पर लेकिन सरदार भगवंत सिंह मान जी ने पूरी ठान ली है, बिल्कुल उनका एक
जो आपने आरोप लगाया है
पंजाब में गैंगस्टर नहीं रहने
श्रोमणी अकाली दल पे, उसका जवाब हम लेंगे। लेकिन मुझे आपसे एक और सवाल पूछना है कि ये जो मर्डर होता है वो that happens a day after your government downgraded security for Sidhu Moosewala. Is your government, is the Aam Aadmi Party government guilty of not properly assessing, I would say, the security situation before making the move?
देखिए, ऐसी कोई बात
क्या
नहीं
गलती हुई है आपसे?
नहीं, कोई गलती नहीं हुई है। हर एक साल जब 6 जून का दिन आता है उस वक्त, क्योंकि पंजाब में ये बहुत बड़ा एक डे होता है और उसमें बहुत सारे लोगों की सिक्योरिटी विड्रॉ होती है, 2 दिन के लिए, 1 दिन के, 3 दिन के लिए। वो 2 गन मैंने वापस लिए। पर लेकिन सिद्धू मूसेवाला अकेले गए थे उस दिन, घर से अकेले निकले। पर लेकिन उनके पास 2 और सिक्योरिटी गार्ड घर में थे। तो मेरा मानना है कि ये पंजाब सरकार, इसमें कोई फॉल्ट नहीं है। पंजाब सरकार ने बहुत सारे लोगों की सिक्योरिटी कम की थी, तो 1-1, 2-2 उनके जो सिक्योरिटी मैंने वापस लिए थे। पर लेकिन पूरी सिक्योरिटी विड्रॉ नहीं की थी। इसमें पंजाब सरकार का कोई कसूर नहीं। पर लेकिन जो गैंगस्टर हैं, बिल्कुल उन्होंने सिद्धू मूसेवाला की हत्या की है और उसका बदला जो आज लिया है, हम किसी को नहीं बख्शेंगे। सबको कानून के तहत सजा देंगे।
Continue to be with us.
उनको मिलेगी।
Let me bring in Mr. Sareen. Mr. Sareen, this murder was executed by Lawrence Bishnoi sitting in Tihar jail, and Goldie Brar, who was in Canada. Would you say that there has been a massive intelligence failure?
There is no doubt that there is a total collapse of the intelligence failure, as well as this government which came to power almost 4 or 5 months back. It's very unfortunate that sitting over here, Mr. Chima is blatantly telling lie to the public. He said that security was withdrawn, and every year it was withdrawn. Is every year the list is published in the public? It is you who publish the list in the public and telling everybody that so and so security has been withdrawn or reduced. You are at fault. You created this situation. You are responsible for the murder of Sidhu Moosewala and others.
No.
Your intelligence headquarters was attacked, and you are unable to track any of them. This is very unfortunate. Still, today I would like to congratulate, though it is too late, but still our forces has done good things. As a BJP appreciates today's encounter, because whosoever wants to kill somebody, he must know that he is to be killed also.
Mr. Chima, ये आप मानते हैं, ये जो उन्होंने सवाल उठाया है, वो सवाल सारे पुलिस वाले भी उठा रहे थे और इन जनरल एनालिस्ट भी उठा रहे हैं कि अगर लिस्ट बनी थी इस तरह की कि उन लोगों पे सिक्योरिटी उन लोगों की विड्रॉ की जाएगी, तो वो पब्लिक डोमेन में लाने की क्या जरूरत थी? ये इसलिए लाया गया था क्योंकि योर गवर्नमेंट वांटेड टू टॉम के हम लोग वीआईपी सिक्योरिटी हटा रहे हैं।
देखिए, ऐसी कोई बात नहीं है। ये सरकार ने कोई पब्लिक डोमेन में नहीं लेके आया इसको कि किसकी सिक्योरिटी बेदरार हुई है या किसको मिल रही है। ये सरकार ने, गवर्नमेंट ने नहीं अनाउंस किया, ये हमारी तरफ से कोई अनाउंसमेंट नहीं थी। पर लेकिन मैं मानता हूं जिन लोगों ने सिद्धू मूसेवाला की हत्या की है उनको हम पूरी तरीके से पूरे कानून के तहत सजा देंगे, और जो भी कोई होगा बड़े से बड़ा गैंगस्टर। जब इनकी सरकार थी पंजाब में बीजेपी और अकाली दल वालों की, इन्होंने कौन सा काम किया गैंगस्टरों के खिलाफ? जब पंजाब में कांग्रेस पार्टी की सरकार थी, कब इन्होंने कौन सा काम किया पंजाब में गैंगस्टरों के खिलाफ? एक भी गैंगस्टर को किसी भी मुकदमे में, जिन मुकदमों में उनका नाम आया था ड्यूरिंग द इन्वेस्टिगेशन, जिन केसों में ड्यूरिंग द इन्वेस्टिगेशन इन लॉरेंस का या और दूसरे जो गैंगस्टर है उनका नाम आया था, किसी एक को प्रोटेक्शन।
I'll go back to the politicians in just a bit. Let me get Mr. Papi and also Shashikant ji. Mr. Shashikant,
just let me reply. Just give me
10 seconds you get.
Yes. Can you tell me whose Twitter was used to publish the list, Mr. Chima? आपके केजरीवाल ने इसको बोला कि हमने इतने लोगों की लिस्ट है, ये रिड्यूस किया, हमने सिक्योरिटी दी थी, सिक्योरिटी वापस ली है।
देखिए, झूठ मत बोल के ऐसी कोई बात नहीं है। ये मीडिया के सेक्शन ने चलाया था पंजाब में। पंजाब सरकार के किसी ट्विटर हैंडल पे कहीं नहीं चलाया गया। झूठ मत बोलिए,
चेक योर ट्विटर,
प्लीज झूठ मत बोलिए मिस्टर।
प्लीज,
आपके कुछ चैनल ने चलाया था,
आप हमारे
कुछ चैनल ने चलाया था। बिल्कुल, हमने ऐसा कुछ नहीं किया है, और ये कंस्पिरेसी बहुत रची जा रही थी।
Vipin Papi, what is evident out of in this entire gang war which has played out is the larger nexus, which is perhaps difficult to crack down. How are they able to operate with impunity in a state like Punjab?
Well, Maria, I must say that you correctly pointed out that it has raised so many questions, and these need to be answered. At the same time, I would like to compliment also the Punjab police for cracking this case and taking in 7 of the 8 accused who were there. Only one of them is still at large, 2 have been killed, 5 others have been arrested. But I wish they had used the same inputs, same intelligence to avoid the tragedy of Moosewala being killed. As one of the speakers, I think that he was the Aam Aadmi Party spokesman, saying that we did not officially release the list, but it's a fact. In public, it was released. There were names of 400 people whose security had been withdrawn.
Okay, there seems to be some problem with that line. Mr. Shashikant, this has turned into a national security threat. Will we see central agencies also intervene to crack down on these criminal syndicates which have almost like a pan-India presence? The fact that Goldie Brar was operating from a jail, Lawrence Bishnoi was operating from Tihar jail.
Yeah, of course. I think that I'm sure that the national security agencies must have been involved in the task in one way or the other. And the guy, this Lawrence Bishnoi, he was sitting in Tihar jail. He was very safe there, and he had all the time to check out the entire plan in detail, absolute detail, and get it implemented also. And what shocks me most is that this guy was in touch with his roots in Canada, this Goldie guy. And another thing that I see, which to my mind is very sinister, is that these 2 guys who have been killed today, they didn't belong to the Bishnoi gang. They belong to the Bhuvanpuria gang. Does it mean that there is this different gangs, Punjab, they're joining and shaking hands with each other? I find that to be very, very sinister development.
Yes, and that kind of, multiple gangs which are operating. Vipin Papi, you wanted to make your point. Please go ahead before we lost that connection with you. Yes.
Yeah, I really, I just lost that. And the thing is that, the place where they have been caught, it's just about 6 kilometers from Indo-Pak border.
Yes.
And, one is still not sure, because investigation will prove whether they had gone there to receive arms and ammunition and more weapons mainly these are being sent through drone these days, or whether they were wanting to flee into Pakistan, because there are a lot of sympathizers and also Khalistani supporters who are residing in Pakistan, and Pakistan has a vested interest in creating trouble here. So 6 kilometers from the border, it's significant. So investigations would need to find out whether they had gone there to receive more arms and ammunition, or whether they were trying to flee into Pakistan.
Yes. So there are multiple angles to it. While we know about the Canada angle and the entire extortion racket which was functioning here, also Mr. Shashikant, what does it say about Punjab police in general and the entire function?
Well, as far as Punjab police is concerned, I think, look, this was a very carefully chalked out plan. Proper red herring was used. These two guys who were eliminated today, they were sitting somewhere in Punjab, and other of these persons, there was rumor, there were news that somebody was sighted and seen in Uttarakhand, somebody in Haryana, somebody in Delhi, Gujarat, Maharashtra. It was a very careful ploy. They used red herring, and these persons were sitting very safely here in Punjab. And I agree with Mr. Papi, but my own doubts whether they could flee from India to Pakistan because they've got barbed wire there. In case there's a tunnel, I don't know. But I'm sure that if that's not the reason, they were waiting for some consignment of arms and explosives, etc., so that they could indulge in more of the heinous acts there in Amritsar district.
Mr. Sareen, the Jammu and Kashmir police have recently cited a rise in drone drops, which are arming gangs and terrorists and even supplying drugs. Is the centre struggling to crack down on the operations of this nexus?
My thing is what our neighbor Pakistan is adopting variable methods how to intrude. First, they physically infiltrate in our country. That has been stopped to a maximum possible extent. And now they have adopted another thing is that through drone they drop drugs, and our forces are doing their best. Even a day before yesterday.
All right.
They saw drone and they fired at it and it returned back.
Okay.
But the thing is, the biggest problem for Punjab is the government which we are having, that, and as far as our police force is concerned, Mr. Shashikant has been a top cop. He knows very well, and we too all Punjabis know. Our police force is very professional, but the only problem at the moment in the Punjab is that they are not having a government who has a
all right, Anil Sareen, thank you so much for joining us. Shashikant ji, Vipin Pabbi and Harpal Singh Cheema. Shifting focus to debate 2, where we look at 5 years of the GST regime. This recently made headlines when paneer butter masala memes exploded on social media after the government announced that customers will have to pay 5% GST on pre-packed food items like paneer, atta and curd. This move by the government faced criticism from citizens who reflected on the impact of the policy on their monthly budget. This prompted Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman to clarify that the 5% goods and services tax was approved by the GST Council after a nod from all states. She clarified that 11 items, when sold loose and not pre-packed or pre-labelled, won't attract GST. However, opposition parties staged a protest in Parliament against inflation and the hike in the GST, claiming Gabbar Singh tax has struck again. Congress leader Jairam Ramesh even said that centre refused to acknowledge the opposition of state finance ministers in the GST Council, adding that the hike will only cut off poor consumers from buying pre-packaged and labelled goods. He also said that GST continues to break the backs of small business owners and shopkeepers, calling it cruel to raise tax rates when there is rising inflation and depreciation of the rupee. The tussle between the centre and the opposition over the GST regime continues. But one nation One market, one tax has been driving motto which has brought 1.3 million taxpayers into a unified indirect taxation system. The introduction of GST has simplified business processes, tax administration and compliances in India. The Ease of Doing Business Index, in which paying taxes is one of the important parameters used to determine a country rankings, has shown significant change. India's ranking during the last 3 years showed a sharp upward momentum from 100 in 2018 to 77 in 2019 and 63 in 2020, a jump of 37 places in a span of just 3 years. 5 years down the GST lane, there are challenges yet to be addressed, be it the highest tax rate of up to 28%, a large number of tax slabs, exclusion of products and sectors from petro products and power, resulting in cascading taxes, as well as technical glitches of the tax portal. To decode the hits, misses and progress of the GST regime, I'm being joined first on the show by Arvind Panagria. He is the professor at Columbia University, a leading economist. Professor Panagria, really appreciate your time. The original rationale for bringing the GST was to prevent the cascading of taxes, but it has also restricted revenue-raising autonomy of individual states. Initially, a 5-year compensation was provided to the states, which is coming to an end. How do you see it unfold from here on? An extension will take away the incentives to ensure proper compliance and promote formalization. Can there be a middle ground, and what could that be?
Maria, there is a broader question here where I think some sort of middle ground may be possible to find. And that is that, a very large number of goods, particularly those that are in the consumer price index basket, are simply not there in the GST net yet. And I think, ultimately, income tax really is paid by very, very few individuals. And it is proper to bring the citizenry into the tax net, at least in some nominal form, meaning that, we all should have a stake. We all should pay some taxes, not necessarily a very large amount, at least some. Redistribution can be done through expenditures. So, we should certainly support the poor, but not every instrument has to be used to do this redistribution. So the design of the taxation should be an efficient one, and one principle of that is to make the tax base broader, as broad as you can make it. And so this is where I think some possibility of a compromise may exist. That look, maybe compensation can be extended for. I think that's a political call as to for how many years. But some sort of negotiation could possibly be done that, you broaden the tax base to bring in some of these products that are, many of these products actually, which are currently not in the tax net, in return for some extension on compensation.
Okay. Professor Panagria, the government has been pushing for formalization of the economy and has brought in several legislations to make that a possibility, including the GST. The monthly collection has gone up significantly. How feasible is it to use the GST collection data to put in place a cash flow based lending for MSMEs in particular? There are approximately 60 million MSMEs and the funding gap is estimated to be about 20 lakh crore. Won't it greatly help in formalization of the economy and higher tax collection? What is holding it back?
Look, the GST itself is relatively new, and it has taken some teething pains to get to where we are now, where at least the GST network is really functioning properly. And now there are issues of further formalization, issues of using the information that the GST network kind of provides us at various levels. I think, there is a lot of information being provided that the government can also use. A lot of the surveys that of enterprises that we do, for example, now would be done, I hope, using the GST list of companies as the sample frame. Likewise, now you mentioned, using the record that is created of the smaller firms paying their GSTs and those who are regular payers of their taxes and have good record could then use that record to borrow. And I certainly think that's a very eminently possible thing to happen. But, this is still work in progress. Some of it may be happening, we do not know. Certainly it's not happening on a large scale just yet. But I think it'll happen. And this is a very good thing we have done. And it opens the door to many things. I gave you two examples, one about using the record to borrow, and also, to use the data and also use the universe of the firms in the GST as a sample frame to do our enterprise surveys.
Okay, Professor Panagria, we are seeing opposition up in arm against the hike in GST. On the opposition's constant question of the number of rates or GST slabs, do you think further rationalization is required? Do you think one rate would be too impractical in India, which is so diverse and has a very different tax profile?
Look, the rationalization in India, because of this noisy democracy, is always slow, and it has to be done in steps. So the way you pose the question, of one single rate, I think that will perhaps at this point of multiple rates which are in existence in GST would be a little too radical. But, it will be good to start thinking in terms of two rates. I think that's a feasible proposition. With some effort, I think states can be brought on board. So that is, and I agree on this one, that rationalization is required. I think multiple rates need to be, I haven't counted, but I know that there are easily 4 rates or more. And going to 2, I think, should be our goal at this point. Maybe, in the next couple of years, we should try to accomplish that.
Last question to you before I let you go. Is the GST somewhat failing as it still micromanages rates on small items?
See, whenever you have too many rates, then inevitably you see there will be lobbying that, put me into the lower rate. And that is really the most powerful argument for having a single rate. Then, the only thing they can come in and seek is raise the rate or lower the rate. I mean, obviously, the enterprise will say lower the rate, but they can't come in and say that lower my specific rate. But as long as you got many of these rates, there will always be this push by the enterprises that, lower my rate. And push me from 18 to 12% or 5%, and that is where I think truly having a single rate is a good thing. But 2, which could be something like 12% and 18%, let's say, would be a big progress, right? So because then maximally what you would get the pressure for is those with 18% will try to say, well, bring me down to 12. But given the revenue needs, etc., the government will be on a much firmer footing, and it would deny that request. But when you got so many rates, then of course it becomes harder.
All right, Professor Panagria, always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time. Let me bring in my guests now on this topic. Sanju Verma, National Spokesperson of the BJP. Dr. Anshul Avijit is Spokesperson of the Congress. Dr. Ajay Dua is former Industry Secretary. We also have Saloni Roy. She is the partner at Deloitte. I'm going to begin with the politician on the show, that is Anshul Avijit. Anshul Avijit, the BJP says that the opposition parties, in fact, all state finance ministers were present in that meeting where this decision was taken. Then why this tutu meme the manner in which it is playing out between the opposition and the government?
No, that is absolutely not true. We have continuously expressed our resentment and our objections to the manner in which the GST Council's meetings are being held. Now, if you remember, Maria, after every GST Council meeting, we have a press conference in which we come out and say that, you listen, there is no consensus building here. I mean, it's just like the parliament. I mean, it seems to be almost like an extension of the parliament in which there is no consensus building. The voice of the opposition is not heard. And the meaning of consensus here is completely different.
The council at its 47th meeting held in Chandigarh on June 29th levied a 5% GST on pre-packaged and labelled local unbranded products such as rice, wheat, curd, lassi, papad and honey. This happened.
We are completely against that. This is the timing of this. It couldn't have come at a worse time. This is a perfect storm when inflation is raging, when it's stubbornly above 7%, it refuses to come down. WPI is at record levels at 16%. Unemployment is rampant throughout. And you can tell by the MNREGA figures, which have vastly increased in June to 2.7 crores. And that is an increase from May by 5%. You can see the unemployment levels. Private consumption is weak. Gross fixed capital formation is still not picking up. Capacity utilization.
Let me take all those questions and objections of the Congress party to Dr. Ajay Dua. Dr. Ajay Dua, you heard the objections that have been raised. The Congress says that at a time when the inflation is over 7%, WPI inflation is over 15%, unemployment is high and rupee is depreciating, this entire move is cruel.
I don't quite agree with that. On the one hand, the opposition states in particular, and that includes the Congress, is asking for continuance of the compensation scheme which ended on 30th of June. And at the same time, they're saying that do not widen your base and to bring in more items under the tax purview. How is that reconcilable? And having said that, let me also point out that in the 47th meeting held at Chandigarh, I don't think there was any dissent whatsoever to covering some of those items which you mentioned about loose food items, unbranded, etc. That those were objected to because the focus of the meeting, as far as I know, was saying how to get the center around to agree to the extension of the scheme of compensation. That's number one point. Number two, yes, there is inflation, nobody denies it, but let's also understand that the average rate in 2019-20 of the GST was 11.5% as against 14.4% prior to 2017 when we put all the taxes of the center and the state together. So we are still at a lower level than what we were. For revenue neutral rate itself, which was agreed to in the GST Council, that was 15.5. And that was based on an detailed exercise by the then Chief Economic Advisor. Having said that, I am all for the fact that let us get more and more items under its fold and let us remove as many exemptions as we can, because today the exemption list is equal to 18% in value of the GST item.
Whereas then how are you, value. I mean, moving away from the opposition, how are you looking at the letter that was sent to Chief Ministers and Finance Ministers of all states by Confederation of All India Traders? They had also demanded that the 5% GST that was imposed on unbranded food grains should be withdrawn.
Yeah, Confederation of that is their job, and to represent the traders, the retail traders in particular. The Confederation does that. They would look at their own business point from that point of view. But at the same time, you might like to recall that certain industries associations had themselves, when the government had made a distinction between unbranded packaged goods and branded packaged goods, a lot of industries lot of large entities had started disowning the package brand, saying this is not ours, we want, this is not ours, somebody is using the label, etc. And these were looked at. There was a fitment committee consisting of secretaries of finance of 7 states, which looked at it and unanimously had, and that included many of the opposition states, if I might be permitted to point that out, and they unanimously had recommended that we should agree with this, because
so if the opposition states or states in general unanimously agreed to it, then why this objection at this point? I'm going to take that question to both the politicians in just a bit, but opening comments from Saloni Roy. Saloni Roy, steps like refund of accumulated input tax credit to exporters is welcome, but we also need more cross-netting of input tax credits across states for companies. What are your thoughts on automating from completion and reducing filing frequency for smaller businesses? We don't want to create burden of compliance or on particularly MSMEs.
So you're right. Credit is an area where we could do more on. We have certain restrictions which were there in the previous regime, which have been carried forward to the GST regime. And considering that, we have a build-up of credits, they could be in a particular jurisdiction. There should be some way of allowing credits to flow from one jurisdiction, one registration where there is excess credits to another jurisdiction where there is a lack of credit and cash needs to be paid. So I would be in favor of that. I think there has been discussion around that. So hopefully, in times to come, we'll see some movement on that. The other question that you had was with respect to MSMEs and how we could improve compliances. Yes, there is a significant reliance on technology. So GST has been, easy for those who are adapting to technology, but for those who don't adapt to technology that easily and that well, it has been challenging because of the various compliances that are all automated. So I don't see technology really going away. It's only going to be enhanced. Yes, there could be simpler return filings for smaller taxpayers, but I only see technology being used further as a GST tool.
Okay, Sanju Verma, the BJP and the government is being accused of penalizing aspiration and desire to buy more hygiene packed goods. That's a charge that has come from Jairam Ramesh.
Maria, Jairam Ramesh.
So,
Saloni, that's a question for Sanju Verma. Now it's the political slugfest which is happening over it. Let her respond. Yes, go ahead, Sanju.
Thank you, Maria. No, Maria, this is a very sensitive issue and I hope it won't turn into a slugfest. Jairam Ramesh is the same man who I remember last year when the Modi government introduced Covaxin. He infamously tweeted, the Modi government is hell-bent on treating Indians like guinea pigs. And today we've crossed 2 billion doses and no thanks to Jairam Ramesh. So Jairam Ramesh has very little credibility. Point number 2, I will speak on a very important issue for the benefit of your audience. First and foremost, Maria, as you mentioned on your show, lose atta, lose dal, lose besan, lose suji, lose puffed rice, all this will continue to attract 0% GST. Now the question people are asking is, why was there a need to introduce 5% GST when there was already inflation which the government is trying to rein in? Yes. Could this not have been avoided? So my simple answer is only this. The decision to introduce 5% GST was taken on 28th June, where West Bengal, Rajasthan and Kerala, which are non-BJP ruled states, also agreed to this 5% GST. But more importantly, this is a revenue neutral introduction, which means that while 5% GST on pre-packaged and pre-labeled goods will be there, this will not bring in any big revenues to the government. All that it will do is it will plug in tax leakages, because please understand, even prior to June 28, 2022, Maria, branded and specified goods in unit containers, in layman terms, branded atta, branded dal, branded suji, used to attract 5% GST. We have simply tweaked the definition from branded to pre-packaged and pre-labeled, because as Nirmala Sitharaman said in a tweet yesterday, small traders, small industry associations said that if you don't bring in uniformity and say pre-packaged and pre-labeled rather than just saying branded, we the small traders are getting hurt. And because the small traders will get input tax credit benefits, so the net impact on end consumers like you and me will be nothing more than what it was prior to 28 June 2022. So the opposition is running a failed narrative.
Okay. Anshul Avijit, I'm looking at another tweet of the finance minister. She says, is this the first time such food articles are being taxed? No. States were collecting significant revenue from food grain in the pre-GST regime. Punjab alone collected more than 2,000 crore on food grain by way of purchase tax. UP collected rupees 700. And the finance minister also cited VAT on rice levied prior to 2017 in Punjab, Telangana, Uttar Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, Bihar to buttress a point. So, is this a case in which there is selective quoting of events only because you want to make this argument that this entire move of 5%, it's timed with the rupee falling, the overall inflation being high?
Absolutely not. You know, I understand perfectly well the revenue neutral rate. I know what it was and what it was envisaged to be, 15 to 15.5%. I know what it is now. I know the inverted duty structure. Fine, it's all okay to correct that. It is the timing at the moment which is of crucial concern. Let me tell you the tweet which Nirmala ji tweeted. You know, she's not well. I really wish her well. But the 14 tweets she tweeted, I want to make a point out of them. She claimed that there was actually rampant misuse of the scheme that was already earlier. That means, you know, there was malfunctions, there were malpractices. So in effect, what it means was that the government's failure to ensure compliance of a particular scheme and ensure that there is no malpractices, in fact, there is no tax evasion, well, the common man has to suffer for their lack of compliance. It's complete irony.
Okay,
you know, that is exactly what they've done in excise duty of fuel.
So the objection that is there, Sanju Verma, is about the timing.
There's a series of them.
And what Anshul Avijit says, that if you are not able to plug in those leakages in terms of fixing responsibility on those who are evading taxes, then why tax Aam Aadmi? Because they are terming this as anti-people.
They're doing it all the time, Maria.
Okay,
it's relentless.
Maria, this is not fair. I did not interrupt him.
Okay,
I did not interrupt him.
He's not interrupting, Sanju.
No, please go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. You know, Anshul made a couple of interesting points. Just taking off from where he left, yes, apart from plugging tax leakages, the reason for 5% GST introduction was to also correct the inverted duty structure, which means that in many cases, the tax on raw material was higher than the tax on finished products, because ideally it is the opposite, which is the established norm. But I'll just tell you one thing, Maria. You know, so much of hue and cry is being raised, but nobody has made one very important point. When Arun Jaitley introduced GST in July 2017, the entire opposition, which was taken into confidence, what had we agreed upon? I'll take 20 seconds to tell you. We said the revenue neutral rate after GST is introduced over the next 5 or 6 years should settle at 15.5%. Do you know what the revenue neutral rate is today? It is 11.4%. Which means that basically we are under-taxing even compared to the commitment that we had made when we introduced GST. 11.4% is the lowest revenue neutral rate anywhere in the world for a nation that is working on GST. Show me one country which has a revenue neutral rate of 11.4% and still has GST and a population of 1.38 billion people. So we are an under-taxed economy. We need to widen our tax base and reduce our tax rate, and that is precisely what we aim to do.
But Sanju, if you're talking about increasing the tax base, again, the point is, why now?
Maria, see, I'll tell you one thing very clearly. What is the primary allegation against the BJP? हम जब कोई welfare scheme लेकर आते हैं, प्रधानमंत्री किसान सम्मान निधि योजना, we said we will put 6,000 rupees into every kisan bank account every year. Oh, this is with an eye on elections. Now, come on, in India, every 4 or 6 months you have an election. We said we are taking a big reform and we are privatizing Air India. Why now? Why not now?
So there is an answer to why now. Anshul, Avijit, 30 seconds and then I'll give the final words to Ajay Dua.
Yes. There's never a good time in India.
You know, Sanju ji spoke about welfare scheme. You know what the dalil was of the then fuel minister? He said कि हम excise duty इसलिए बढ़ा रहे हैं कि लोगों को जन कल्याण में उसका पैसा देंगे. मतलब उन्हीं से ले रहे हैं और वापस उन्हीं को दे रहे हैं. देखिए, there is a pattern here. The government does not know anything about macroeconomics, does not know how to raise revenue, and the only way it can do it is by robbing the poor. That's exactly what it's doing.
Under PM Kisan. We have given
the only way it's doing it through the relentless rise of excise duty of fuel and through other kind of rampant increases of indirect taxes in which the poor have to. Let me speak, Sanju ji. Let me finish. You'll get a chance. I'm sure Maria will give you a chance to rebut what I'm saying. I just want to say that by relentlessly increasing indirect taxes at the wrong time and mismanaging the economy, you know, the Indian economy.
Dr. Ajay Dua, let him have the final words, because I think it's less about politics and more about understanding the nuances here. Yes,
Maria,
Dr. Ajay Dua.
We have been, if you would recall, ever since the pandemic set in, we have been in the GST reducing the rates. That's how we come down to 11.4 or 11.5, and 200, as many as about 200 items were put in the exemption list. That means they used to have a tax earlier, 5 or 12%, they were brought down to 0. There is, if we have to continue with the scheme and have the benefit of GST's rationalization, the very important cascading effect to go away, and the input tax credit being made available, we cannot deny that there is need for greater coverage of the number of items left out. Apart from all these items of food, etc., we should look at it from the point of view of the common man. I would say not because it's a food item or it's a drug. If it can be afforded by a rich guy, probably doesn't deserve it. But if it is going to help out the poor, yes, we should do it. But I'm all for,
can I just take 10 seconds?
Let him finish his point. Yes.
Like to bring under the coverage of GST at the earliest ATF, residences, residential construction with the underlying land, as well as going forward. We must bring
10 seconds.
Yes, Sanju, 10 seconds.
Diesel, petrol, etc. Only then we will be able to keep the rates at the lower level.
I need to make just one quick point, Maria. And that is that when GST was introduced, there were 226 items which attracted 28% GST. Do you know? Today there are only 29 items like aerated drinks, tobacco, high-end premium TVs which attract 28% GST. From 226 to 29
one word,
items
final word.
Only 29 items attract 28% GST. Which is a huge
we have really...
One final word, Maria.
I have really run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us.
We need to restructure the GST.
Anshul, Avijit, Ajay Dua, Saloni Gaur and Sanju Verma, thank you so much for your time. We're slipping into a short break. After that, we'll be getting you the latest from the elections that are taking place in UK. Rishi Sunak has moved closer to being perhaps the next Prime Minister of United Kingdom.